I don't know if every, bride walking down the aisle is like, I can't wait to be his sex worker. At the same time, honey, you about to go into business and there's going to be, get some knee pads, get a triangle pillow and get to humping because you and your man just made some commitments.
Welcome back to Muse on the Mic. I'm Riley.
And I'm Emily. Thanks again for joining us on another awesome episode of Muse on the Mic. So glad you're here, guys. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, join us every week on YouTube and Patreon. Make sure you go check out Patreon, guys. There's so much spicy shit over there. It's too hot for YouTube. I won't say much more. But also find us on social media, all the captions in the link and description below. Riley, let us know what we're getting up to today. I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic.
We are diving into an extremely controversial topic. I will lead with that. This is from X or Twitter. It was a post from ZZ Mills that we're going to react or watch with you guys and react to. And it's posing the question, is marriage sex work?
Dun, dun, dun.
I have so many thoughts on this.
I have so much to say too, and I can like almost hear people either cringing or being like, "Yeah," like it just, yeah, it depends. This could be, it's not gonna be a bipartisan situation. Let's check out the video. We'll laugh about it afterwards.
I get what you mean.
Activities where I'm being paid.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting about this conversation I was having regarding prostitution was this came off the back of me saying that the thing people don't want to recognize is, and this is going to be very controversial to say, but marriage also is sex work, because a lot of women, what they're doing is, and this is controversial to say.
Go on,
because
I'm going to hear this. Let's hear this.
In your definition, where you said earlier about prostitution, where like you sleep with a man, you get money, or you hang out with him, you get money. Why I say marriage is prostitution is because what happens is women engage in marriage from a place where, okay, ideally, he's gonna take care of you financially, and there's a home for you both to live in. And what you are doing is you're fulfilling a role. So you're going to either be some sort of like homemaker, homekeeper, you're raising and rearing the kids, and you are partnering with him and sleeping with him in the hopes that the trade-off will be that you get validation, love, and upkeep. And the man understands and believes that if he continues to fulfill that role for you, then the arrangement works, because marriage is an arrangement. Now, why I say it's prostitution is because whilst it's not necessarily on the surface, you're fucking for a transactional exchange, there's something that you're fucking for.
But then there's the basis of a relationship. I guess the reason why prostitution is because it's sexual, it's nothing but sex. So you get the sex, you go. Whereas a marriage, to even get to the marriage, there would have been a build of a relationship, friendship, gone through a few things, families involved. Maybe you might even have kids now. So I think that's why that would be the
people
difference.
Wouldn't understand that. And why I'm fascinated by that is because what people really miss out on in that conversation and in their opposition to the idea of marriage being a form of sex work is once you stop being able to render that service to the man, he leaves you. So, for example, I've seen countless situations where the woman has gained weight after having children, and the man has decided he doesn't want to be with her anymore because either her libido has lowered, so she's no longer interested in having sex. She doesn't feel good about herself. She doesn't want to have sex. So that man moves on. Or the woman becomes disabled or becomes sick and needs long-term care from her husband. And he leaves because he can't be asked and he doesn't want to do that and he can't have sex with her anymore. So what I've observed is that once men stop seeing you as the person that can fulfill that transactional need that they want from you, their energy switches up very quickly.
So that is a hot topic. And I think it's not, cookie cutter. I don't think every marriage will fall into this category. But in general, I think when you get married, you are going into business with someone. There is mutual goals, trade-off, power exchange. Sex is tied into that. It really is an interesting dynamic. And marriage isn't always just full of love and passion and, all the fun stuff. There's actual business behind it at times too, right?
Absolutely. It can be even more business for some than others. And it all revolves around contracts. A marriage certificate is a contract. You register with the government, you pay taxes differently, prenups. There's a lot of contractual stuff that comes in. And technically, sex work is a contract between two
Right.
parties that exchange a service for a payment. And
Right.
I mean, this is part of why we try to fight stigma and advocate for equality, because it's no different than any other business exchange that exchanges money for the plumber that just came and fixed your toilet. Like,
Right.
it is a labor exchange and a financial gain. And there are some very successful marriages that fail in the passion department, but profit as a business like none other.
Right.
There
Right.
are very few that I think balance both of those worlds exceptionally well. Um, and at various times, there are highs and lows in the passion department. There are highs and lows in even the friendship. There are highs and lows in the profitability of the family. You go into debt when you buy a new house, but you can profit if you rent the basement. Like, there's a lot of
Mhm.
decisions to make. Kids will drain the bank account, but once they're off to college, now there's a reason why empty nesters travel. Like, it
Mhm.
really is. And it should be renegotiated and revisited often. But in those phases, there's all the little kind of mini chunks and the mini proportions that are about things like sexual appetite and how often do we do it and which partner is happy with that and which one isn't, and how do we adjust? How do we compromise? Or do we at all? And the
Mhm.
marriage fails, like a business
Right.
would fail, sometimes they
Yeah.
go belly up. And so I don't know if every, bride walking down the aisle is like, I can't wait to be his sex worker. At the same time, honey, you about to go into business and there's going to be, get some knee pads, get a triangle pillow and get to humping because you and your man just made some commitments. And
Yeah.
I think that needs to be acknowledged a little bit more, especially in the passion department, because that is equally part of the contract. You are agreeing to be exclusively intimate with each other to come to some other terms. But
Right.
that too is a renegotiation of the marriage, right? To open marriage, to swing, to try a threesome once. Those are all contractual discussions where we talk about safe words, how to exit a contract, when the whole scene is going to stop if someone's uncomfortable, which parties are involved. Is there an NDA? If we learned anything from 50 Shades of Grey, it's put certain things in the paper and certain things don't go in the paper. Like, but everybody needs to sign and everybody needs to be in agreement. So is that any different than putting little Timmy into soccer camp? Like, these are all decisions that need to be made all the time. And so you don't just have to realize, okay, this is an exchange of services for some kind of reward, but there's also multiple times where you're going to sit down with your equal, hopefully not your boss, and renegotiate those terms or renegotiate the next chapter or the promotion that you're both giving yourselves or whatever it may be. And that can go infinite number of directions depending on what your goals are as a couple. But listen, there's some women that also marry for money on purpose. So
Mhm.
that's a whole different ball
Well,
game,
listen, I
right?
will say we spoke about this earlier. I think, and I don't discriminate. I have no problem you want to marry for money, but I hope that there is a little bit of self-reflection to know that you are a sex worker, and your job doesn't end when you get off shift. So I think it's a very different life of sex work that I think most of those wives don't even acknowledge exists. But that's just my 2 cents. But I think it's interesting because in a relationship, oftentimes a long-term relationship, sex does come from a compassionate place.
Yes.
It's not always hot and heavy. There's phases of life and phases of marriage and parenthood that there is an exchange. And let's say you're a stay-at-home mother that has been given that luxury of being able to stay home and raise your children, and the man provides. And I think there's always this background thought of, I need to keep him productive and happy and successful and earning. And what better way to keep him on that path than with sex? And it may not always come from a place of passion, but it's in the back of your mind that it needs to be done. And I think
Right.
both sexes know this in a marriage, but I can only speak kind of from the woman's end a little bit more, that I think women should recognize that they do need to put out to keep their man happy. And that is the exchange. You want to sit home and raise Timmy? Well, you need to keep him productive and happy. And there's that exchange without it being spoken.
nail on the head, Riley. That was one of your best rants ever, because it really like just accentuates all the bullet points. And you could call our perspective bias, or you could call our perspective enlightened, because we hear from men in a way that 99.9% of women, especially wives, never hear about. And so we hear their complaints. I could write a novel about what's missing from the average marriage, because we hear it on repeat every single day, right?
Right.
And so from our perspective, men are often, not always, but often the ones craving more intimacy in their relationships. Or when it's completely cut off, they seek sometimes a professional instead of an affair to fill the void, I guess, for lack of better words, but to get that craving, or that satisfaction, or that attention. And I hate hearing stories about sexless marriages. Not that it's fun either way. I've been in them where it wasn't my choice. But often it's the woman's choice, and she's the one kind of removing it. I've also, I think, ranted on the pod a few times that I hate when women remove sex as a behavior modification tool, because that's juvenile and ridiculous and downright abusive to someone's psyche. But then what else do we expect to do with that man? Now, listen, if you're going to full-time marry your sugar daddy, honey, you don't get those options.
No.
You made a very different contract than other people did. And that's, like you said, I don't judge it. It's fine, but you have to know what you're signing up for. And I think when we were chatting earlier, I'd said to you, well, I hope she even likes him, because money's great and all. It can do a lot of things. Like you said, it can find happiness in many ways. But if you can't stand the person you're with,
Right.
which, let's be real, not every sex worker loves every client, and not every sugar daddy has a sugar baby that's like, he's dreamy. Like
Right.
it really depends. But if you're going to take that full-time plunge, because like you said, there's no off shift, y'all have to at least get along. Y'all at least have to have some sort of friendship chemistry, physical chemistry of some kind, common goals. Even if she just wants to be rich and live the rich girl life, fine. But also, where are we traveling to? Where are we purchasing? Where are we living? What are we doing with this bond, this union? And that's really hard to dip out of, or to suddenly disconnect from, or remove that portion, as we know what he's going to do next, right? He's going to close your bank account or stop depositing in it, and immediately it's going to be a fight over money. And those divorces are some of the messiest. So you really have to know kind of what you're signing up for, what your responsibilities are, which again would be nice in a contract.
Well, and I think, again, I don't want to shit on marriages, because I think there's some really loving, loyal marriages and people that are partake in them. But like she touched on in the video, will your husband trade you in if you all of a sudden get sick or have a disability or stop putting out? Like, there is that exchange that always seems necessary. And to some men, they will replace you if you're not able to provide at that point. So it's something you really have to be aware of. And I think when you go into the marriage, you're not necessarily thinking of these things, but to look at the big picture of keeping him happy, or keeping her happy and productive. Sex is that exchange.
Oh, hey, welcome back to Just the Tip with Riley. So we've been discussing all things Muse lately, on the pod and in the tips. So let's keep that ball rolling and dive into our premium sessions today. Emily and I have created so many feature sessions over the years. Some missed the mark and some were quick fan favorites. So let's discuss the ones that have earned a permanent spot on our menu. Choosing one of our premium sessions can fulfill a fantasy on your bucket list, allow you to get up close and personal with more than one muse at once, or even challenge some of the vets in our industry. So starting off strong, let me introduce the Muse Mixer. This legendary session is a 1-hour action-packed fantasy roller coaster. The breakdown is 1 hour, 3 muses, 20-minute intervals, and 2 seamless duo overlaps. To me, the Mixer is the ultimate fantasy challenge. As the customer, you get to create your own adventure. You can attempt to climax 2 times, 3 times, or edge all the way through for one toe-curling finish.
If this tip isn't enough, subscribe to Patreon for the whole thing.
Well, there's definitely, there's so many nuances to this, but there's differences between a short-term situation that takes you out of the bedroom game versus a long-term change, and depending on the kind of health crisis or injury or something like that, that's different than postpartum, you know, like
Right.
there are certain things that are temporary, even if they're years long, they're phases of life. And they make sense from a societal perspective, a health and science perspective. I mean, there's reasons why, you know, women dealing with young kids don't have the energy to put into all this. They don't have time to think about feeling sexy time because they haven't felt sexy in years. Like there's reasons for that, but it's not 18 years. It's a certain
Mhm.
amount of time. It's a known and digestible chunk. And you and your partner need to communicate about those things in between. And there has to be give and take and sacrifice on both sides, right? Maybe we don't do it as much as we used to, but we still do it some. Like there has to
Mhm.
be a little bit of everything. What I dislike is when even a wife going through a good reason to not necessarily be in an intimate phase of her life is discarded for a situation that probably has another year left on it. That I
Right.
think is a little bit shitty.
Yeah.
And you gave vows for a reason. That said, I know lots of couples where a partner is now very ill or suffers from dementia or had a spinal injury or some reason why they're no longer able to be intimate. And for some couples, it's just not spoken about. For some, they allow the healthy partner to find companionship on the
Mhm.
outside. For some, we hear from wives sometimes, they're like, I have just recovered from cervical cancer. I'm not able to be intimate with my husband at all, and I trust him to go to Muse. And
Mhm.
so who would give him the best experience? Or I want to come with him and watch, or whatever the negotiation and the little details are. Love our couple sessions for that option, right?
Mhm.
But they do acknowledge at least that something that was agreed upon is now being removed from the contract, and we have to supplement it with something because we
Mhm.
want this union to maintain itself. And there could be recovery and cures and advances in medication that might change that dynamic down the road, but they don't just write off the other person. It is something
Mhm.
discussed and a mutual decision of some sort. And that's, again, not only is it nuanced, it's emotional, and then that is a
Mhm.
very like long-term conversation. That's not even a discussion over dinner one night, but it gives options. And I
Mhm.
think a place like Muse gives a lot of great options for people that are in kind of a sticky circumstance, whether they have or have not yet had those kinds of discussions with their partner for any reason. I mean, we do have clients come in and say they're happily married and have sex all the time. So
Mhm.
who are we to say what's what? But if there is that lack, I love that there is a place like Muse to be able to supplement without someone necessarily fully, from an emotional standpoint, stepping out on a
Mhm.
commitment, because it is a commitment, whether it's
Yeah.
before God or your friends or on a paper at City Hall. You said some things and you signed on the dotted line. Can't get out of
Yeah.
a mortgage. Like
Well, and I
these are
think
contracts.
when men enter marriage, even subconsciously, I don't know if they actually think about this to themselves, but I mean, you think about a man growing up, he's dating, he's meeting women, he's trying to find his person. He does, proposes and gets married. In his mind, I've got built-in sex for the rest of my life. That's part
Right.
of the deal, right? And so when that doesn't happen, or, does he feel slighted that, well, no,
Yeah.
we got married, this is what I should be receiving.
Well, some people digest it well and communicate, and some
Mhm.
people, like you just said, just they don't. They take it very personal. It's offensive, and not just a point of contention, but almost like a card to play against the other, or a
Mhm.
dig. You can put at them. I've read enough Reddit stories to realize some people use it as a thing to actually hurt the person emotionally. To be like flaunting in their face that they're cheating, or well, it's because you don't do X, Y, Z anymore, and so on and so forth. And obviously those aren't healthy circumstances, but it can be really awkward for people to communicate. Not everyone's great at
Mhm.
communication, especially when it comes to matters of the bedroom. I
Mhm.
think sex and money are the weirdest things for people to communicate that aren't comfortable with those kind of topics. And we're clearly comfortable with the sex topic. Money we
Mhm.
like, but uncomfortable money conversations are no easier, right? If times are tight, those are tense meetings sometimes
Yeah.
amongst partners. And we've been business partners a long time. We're lucky we don't have many tense meetings, but
Mhm.
there's been tense phases of our business's life,
Mhm.
right? And even those are sometimes hard conversations to have. What do we sacrifice, or what do we got to change, or what are we doing with this next opportunity that's coming about that we know is going to leap ahead? There's positive tension as well, but it takes that communication. And I know from a business standpoint, we're really good at that. I would hope those skills would play out in our personal relationships. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if you've never had those kind of conversations in any perspective, whether it was with family back in the day, whether it's with your, your work or your business environment, or at home in your relationships or your marriage, it can be really uncomfortable to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And to just say, I'm not satisfied with our sex life or with our frequency of sex life, or that it's dipped a lot, or, whatever the objection is, you want to say it in a way that doesn't harm the other person. We're not trying to attack. We're trying to communicate and get to a common ground. And there's not enough courses out there for that kind of thing. Like it's not taught in school how to have successful relationships, right? So just like it's not taught budgeting and paying your taxes and all kinds of useful facts that would be fun for humans as they adult, it becomes really difficult. But at the end of the day, you made certain promises for better
Mm-hmm.
or worse, and sickness and health, and yada, yada, yada. And
Right.
so you need to fulfill your end of the bargain. That is what the contract is about. And I think that's why divorce situations, unless they're completely uncontested, become so personal and so testy, is because it's always about sex and money. And it's
Mm-hmm.
always a he said, you did, you didn't, blah, 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 back and forth of like lobbying, of like insults going this way, that
Mm-hmm.
way. It's the first thing that either partner that feels slighted is going to bring up. Yeah, well, you don't put out anymore. Yeah, well, you slept with the neighbor. Like it's just going to always go that way. But if you want to live that high life with the money on his salary, again, honey, get those knee pads and don't complain about it later, because you signed up for this contract, this life, this
Yeah.
circumstance.
Well, and I
You
think
stop
women
scared.
do use it as a tool, and I don't fault them for it. Actually, even men use it for a tool, but women would if, they're asking for something extravagant, or for him to bend over is the wrong word, but to, do something extra for her. She often leads with sex, and women as a species, we use sex to our advantage. That's just human nature. But I think men
100%.
even do it too. He wants to go away for the boys' trip, and I know she's going to be left with the kids, but he'll lead with, whether it's a massage and some good oral. Like there's always this exchange, and that is sex work. It's the exchange of service for something. So I,
Yeah,
I think it is a
absolutely.
part of marriage, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. It sounds so bad the way we're relating it is sex work or marriage sex work, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just recognizing it actually does exist.
Yeah, it's a context, right? It's a way, it's a
Yeah.
perspective to look at it. Um, I mean, I put this as a point in our column for pro sex work, because welcome to the world, everybody. Like it's
Right.
we're discriminating against what? Like, is that the difference? Is that you need a marriage certificate for it to be okay? It's
Right.
just it's strange. But I mean, that's a whole political, religious, and moral discussion in itself, and an ongoing debate that will always exist. But when you break it down to something that is so common and so ordinary to the average person, nobody
Mhm.
bats an eye, at a union amongst two people and the contract that they sign. I'd say the
Right.
only time that happens is if it's, against the grain. If it's, a really, really, really old man and a 22-year-old, well, then the gold digger thing comes in. The family might be in uproar, and the objections might come in. Or when that reverses and it's a really old cougar and a really young gent, then that equal like public outrage would happen. But
Mhm.
other than that, it's common thing. I can look down my street and see married people all over the place, and they've all entered a contract for an exchange of some sort of reward
Yeah.
for the intimacy and connection that they're giving in
Mhm.
exchange.
Yeah. It's
We just need
interesting.
the government to stay the fuck out of the bedroom. That's all. It's true though. So as controversial as it is, when you break it down to those points, it's actually not at all. It's
I
actually
agree.
completely common. Everybody does it. Some people stay in it, some people leave it, some people come back to it. Like it's literally
Right.
no different than a stripper, or like half our staff, or the girl that worked 7 years ago and now she's back because she decides she wants to go back to school. Like,
Yeah.
listen, some people get married 8 times, they still want to try again. It just depends on what the circumstances are for your life and the financial consequences of those splits in between. But
Mhm.
if you have the means,
I
right?
agree.
She's got the drive and the will, especially if she's a young little chippy and she's got the bod to go with it. Girl, ride the ride.
Mhm.
I'm here for it.
So,
Hilarious. But I love that it was brought up. I've never watched this show before. It made me watch this episode. I was captivated.
Yeah.
Because I love a controversial debate. I love people that get it. And you have to really get sex work to be able to debate sex work. This is why I disregard a lot of the anti-sex work people, is because they've never even spoken to a sex worker and just go off like religious quotes that's their reasoning. But when you get it, you can have those nuanced discussions, just like we're having now, right? Where you can break down why it might sound that way or why it makes sense to call it that, because
Mhm.
it's actually technically not wrong whatsoever. It's literally exchange of service for money.
Well, I
Our
wonder how
favorite.
many people will agree with us and how many people will be pissed off, but let us know in the comments, guys, what you
The
think.
comment section will reveal for sure. It always
Mhm.
does. I love it. But let's have that conversation, because there
Mhm.
might be a new perspective in the comments that we didn't even think about. And I love that.
Yeah,
Wicked. This was a good one.
mhm.
I loved it. All right, guys. Well, like the video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Guys.